Protests all over the India continue for the protection of doctors and lawyers and all other women workers. Hello, welcome. I'm Shakil 5858. I'm Ahmed Budnam. I am thankful to all international news resources and my team. Following other news which have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian, and Canadian channels, and AP, AFP, and Reuters news agencies. Now the headlines. Tim Walz has expected the vice presidency nomination in DNC convention in Chicago. Donald Trump is campaigning in North Carolina with bulletproof glass. Russian capital under attack by Ukraine drones. No casualty reported. Russian forces captured many areas in eastern part of Ukraine. Israeli pounding of Gaza continues, killing 17 people today. Railway workers strike in Canada. 3 homicides in Manitoba, Canada. Floods in China. On Wall Street, Nasdaq, S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial all went down. Now please watch the channels.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz at the Democratic National Convention. On the NewsHour tonight, after the Obamas make the case for a Kamala Harris presidency, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz prepares to formally accept the nomination for vice president.
We speak to members of the House and Senate about Democrats' chances of winning majorities in those chambers on Election Day.
And while the world's eyes are focused on Gaza, hardliners ramp up efforts to expand Israeli settlements and violently expel Palestinians in the West Bank.
I fear for my family. Every day, people are being killed. I'm afraid of the future. It may kill me at any moment.
Carolina Congressman James Clyburn, thanks so much, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we turn now to the Middle East, where Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah have been trading strikes today.
For that and the day's other headlines, we turn now to our William Brangham in our Washington studio. William?
Thanks, Jeff and Amna. Hezbollah fired more than 50 rockets towards Israel today, some causing damage in the Israeli-annexed Golan Heights. Israel's ambulance service reported the projectiles hit several private homes and injured one person, causing alarm among community members.
Some of the residents want to leave. Others are patriots who want to stay. But it cannot continue this way. Every sound of a door shutting makes us think it's a boom. This time, it wasn't a door, but a serious boom that cost us a lot.
Hezbollah says the barrage was in response to Israeli airstrikes deep inside Lebanon. Residents of one Lebanese village held a funeral today for a man they say was killed in an Israeli attack. It comes a day after Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with mediators in the region to push a proposal aimed at bridging the gaps in the Gaza ceasefire talks. Egyptian officials reportedly expressed skepticism today that Hamas would in fact accept that proposal. Talks are expected to resume in Cairo tomorrow. Health authorities in Congo say they've recorded more than 1,000 Mpox cases in the last week amid an urgent need for vaccines. Congo accounts for more than 90% of the cases reported in Africa so far this year. Last week, the WHO classified the outbreak as a global health emergency. African officials say Western nations and Japan have pledged several 100,000 vaccine doses, but Congo's health minister says the country alone needs some 3 million doses to control the outbreak. In Italy, divers found 5 more bodies while searching the luxury yacht that sank off the coast of Sicily on Monday. Recovery crews unloaded body bags from a rescue vessel in Porticello. They're still searching for one final missing person. 15 other passengers and crew escaped in a lifeboat and were rescued. Authorities say they believe the British flag Bayesian, seen here in file video, was struck by a tornado on the water, which is known as a waterspout. But questions remain as to why the yacht sank so quickly. Russian officials say that Ukraine launched one of its largest drone attacks on Moscow last night since Russia's invasion in 2022. Russia claims to have struck down 45 drones, including 11 over Moscow itself. There has been no independent verification of those figures. That comes as Ukraine digs in to defend the city of Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine from Russian advances. Its capture would be an important victory for Russia as Ukraine pushes forward with its own incursion further north in Russia's Kursk region. In Moscow today, a foreign ministry spokesperson said Ukraine's military advances there undermine any chances for peace talks.
Кто с ними после этого вообще будет договариваться?
Who will negotiate with them after this, after the atrocities, the terror that they are committing against peaceful residents, the civilian population, civilian infrastructure, and peaceful facilities?
Ukraine's military claims to have taken nearly 500 square miles in Kursk since it first entered Russian territory earlier this month. Back here in the U.S., the economy added far fewer jobs last year and into 2024 than previously reported. In its revised data out today, the Labor Department said that there were 818,000 fewer jobs created between April of last year and this March. That's an average of 174,000 jobs per month, far fewer than the 242,000 that was initially reported. This downgrade follows a disappointing report last month and comes as the U.S. Federal Reserve considers whether to cut interest rates next month. On Wall Street today, stocks ended slightly higher after the Fed raised hopes of an interest rate cut next month. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added 55 points, inching closer to the 41,000-point level. The Nasdaq tacked on more than 100 points for a ninth win in 10 sessions. The S&P 500 also ended higher on the day. And we have two passings of note. New Jersey Congressman Bill Pascrell Jr. died earlier this morning. The 14-term Democrat was a fixture of his hometown of Paterson, where he had served as mayor before running for Congress in 1996. Pascrell was a longtime advocate for emergency responders and sat on the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. No cause of death has been announced, but he had been in and out of the hospital for months. Congressman Bill Pascrell was 87 years old. Also today, NBA Hall of Famer Al Attles has died. As one of the first black head coaches in the league, Attles led the Golden State Warriors to a championship in 1975. Attles, seen here defending a pass in 1963, was known as the Destroyer for his particularly physical style of play. He spent 6 decades with the Warriors as a player, a general manager, and team ambassador. It is the longest stint by a player with the same franchise in NBA history. Al Attles was 87 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, on the ground in the West Bank, where hardliners are building more Israeli settlements in violation of international law.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Tonight in Chicago, Kamala Harris's running mate Tim Walz facing his biggest test yet on the national stage here at the Democratic National Convention. The Minnesota governor set to accept his party's nomination for vice president in Chicago. A big chance for the former teacher and football coach to introduce himself to the American people after Republicans attacked his military service and record as governor. His speech coming a night after two of the party's biggest stars fired up the crowd, Barack and Michelle Obama, making the case for Harris and unleashing scathing attacks on Donald Trump. And Mr. Trump today hitting back at his first outdoor rally since the attempt on his life, now speaking behind bulletproof glass. Plus news on RFK Jr., sources saying he plans to drop out, how it could shake up the race. The grim discovery in that sunken yacht off Italy. 5 bodies found, 1 person still missing. The growing questions tonight. Ukraine launching a drone attack on Moscow, the largest since the war began. Dozens arrested at protests over Gaza here in Chicago. Our conversation with the father of an American hostage fighting to bring him home after more than 300 days.
This is NBC Nightly News. Reporting tonight from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, here is Lester Holt.
Good evening from Chicago and the floor.
Tonight, the Democratic nominee for Vice President Governor Tim Walz takes center stage at the party's convention. Who is he and what will he say tonight? Plus, Democratic heavyweights, former President Bill Clinton and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi make the pitch for Vice President Harris after a fiery night from the Obamas.
America's ready for a better story. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
A special edition of the CBS Evening News from Chicago starts now.
Senator Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Let's listen to this.
2.5 centuries ago in Philadelphia, a band of patriots declared their independence from a king and set ourselves on a path of self-determination. Generation after generation has embraced that responsibility. Ordinary Americans rising up, demanding more, seeking justice. And in every chapter of our American story, we've made progress and advanced the cause of freedom. Today we find ourselves writing that next chapter. Will we be a nation defined by chaos and extremism? Or will we choose a path of decency, honor, and continued progress? Kamala Harris, well, she has spent her entire career making progress. Donald Trump, a man with no guardrails, wants to take away our rights and our freedoms. And listen, while he cloaks himself in the blanket of freedom, what he's offering isn't freedom at all. Because hear me on this, it's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. No, it's not. And it's not freedom to tell women what they can do with their bodies. And hear me on this, it sure as hell isn't freedom to say you can go vote, but he gets to pick the winner. That's not freedom. But you know what? You know what, Democrats? We are the party of real freedom. That's right. The kind of real freedom that comes when that child has a great public school with an awesome teacher because we believe in her future. Real freedom that comes when we invest in the police and in the community so that child can walk to and from school and get home safely to her mama. Real freedom that comes when she can join a union, marry who she loves, start a family on her own terms, breathe clean air, drink pure water, worship how she wants, and live a life of purpose where she is respected for who she is.
Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Bill Clinton and Kamala Harris's running mate Tim Walz set to speak to the nation a short time from now. We'll carry it live on ABC in prime time. Also tonight, with Americans among the missing, the grim discovery now inside a massive boat that sank off Italy, and a circus performer surviving a horrific fall from a tightrope while performing. First tonight here, Governor Tim Walz, center stage for night 3 at the Democratic National Convention. The former social studies teacher and high school football coach and retired National Guard member will make the case for Kamala Harris 24 hours after former President Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama urged Americans to act, to make a plan to vote, and taking aim at Donald Trump. Tonight, Donald Trump responding to the Obamas. Also tonight, sources telling ABC News Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may be dropping out of the race for president. Will he endorse Donald Trump? Has he been promised some sort of role if Trump is elected? And did Kennedy reach out to the Harris campaign too, looking for a possible role? John Carl talking to RFK Jr. today and what John has learned. Former President Trump holding his first outdoor campaign event since the attempted assassination. Trump behind bulletproof glass today. The other news tonight, with Americans among the missing, that grim recovery effort now on the ocean floor. At least 4 bodies pulled from inside that sunken boat off Sicily. Tonight, Russia reporting a major drone attack on Moscow, with Ukraine pushing into Russia. The new images tonight of the fighting on Russian soil. Back here in the U.S., record heat across several states, while in the east, some temperatures in the 50s. And a new tropical threat we're now watching tonight. The U.S. economy tonight, the revised numbers when it comes to jobs. And does this make a rate cut from the Fed even more likely, which could lower car loans, mortgages, and credit card rates? The disturbing images tonight, a circus performer on that tightrope surviving the fall while performing in front of an audience. In the Northeast tonight, the deadly home explosion in Pennsylvania. Tonight, the cause here. The concern over some baby food in the U.S., the alarming new study tonight, and what they found. And off the U.S. coast, the sightseers who came for the whales, but it was the dolphins who put on the show. And you'll see it.
From ABC News, this is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir, reporting tonight from Chicago.
Speaking of excitement, there's one little squib of tape that I want to play, which is the moment we discussed it earlier, where Gus Walz, the son of Tim Walz, with tears in his eyes, said, "That's my dad." Do we have that? With his dad on the stage. You see both Hope and Gus Walz. That's my dad. Both Hope and Gus Walz tearing up, seeing their dad up there. Oh, that moment. Joy and Alex, is Minnesota still going?
Can I just say, in the words of the great Teddy Riley, it ain't over. The party's not over. They ain't going on.
Minnesota's still at it. Just FYI, guys.
That hotel lobby's gonna be lit.
Ain't no party like a Minnesota delegation party. Can I say something about the Gus Walz thing? There has been a lot of talk about masculinity and MAGAism trying to own masculinity in the most regressive, sort of misogynist way. Say something about the Gus Walls thing. There has been a lot of talk about masculinity and MAGAism trying to own masculinity in the most regressive, sort of misogynist way possible. J.D. Vance lecturing everybody on, what a family means, what it means to be a man. Donald Trump obviously has his own version of manhood. To see Tim Walz out there as a man who is just joyfully embracing his role as the potential vice president to the nation's first female president is an extraordinary thing. But also to see his son weeping.
On this Wednesday night, the investigation into the sinking of that super yacht. Wednesday night, the investigation into the sinking of that super yacht. Why did it capsize so quickly?
We've got this high impact but low probability event.
As 5 bodies are recovered. The showdown to stop a rail shutdown, the deadline to strike a deal.
There has been, I would say, some movement.
And the fears among farmers whose harvest is already underway. Potential conflict of interest, how a federal cabinet minister's former company was awarded a government contract. Global News investigates. And a rare glimpse into the reclusive nation of North Korea.
It's really mind-boggling stuff when you start watching their propaganda.
One Canadian's surprising find while satellite surfing.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining.
Tonight, the deadline passes to reach a deal. Canadians face a shutdown.
This has a major impact on North American supply chain.
Governor Tim Walz. Tim Walz center stage at the DNC.
It's the honor of my life to accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States.
As Donald Trump fires As Donald Trump fires back on Democratic digs.
There's not a thing they've done well except cheat and lie.
New details on a triple homicide in Manitoba.
An absolute horrific act of intimate partner violence.
Plus, parents feel the pinch paying for school supplies.
Everything is so outrageous, it's ridiculous.
And 40 years later, the onstage reunion on the Rock.
I hope that Gloria is close by and that she can come up here.
Shania Twain reconnects with an old friend.
She treated me like one of the family.
So after the passing of a midnight Eastern deadline, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City ordered lockouts. Already, pickets are coming up in Vancouver and Calgary. Work stoppages have never occurred at those railways at the same time. So to sort this out, let's bring in Anis Hadari, who is following the story for us. So Anis, with the talks having just broken down, what precisely do we know at this hour?
We know that around 9,300 workers between both Canadian Pacific Kansas City and Canadian National are locked out at this point. The companies and the same union for both, the Teamsters, they've clearly been unable to come to a deal after a really long and fractious bargaining process. At some points, both sides couldn't even agree on what they disagreed about. The union said CPKC wanted to weaken rules protecting workers from fatigue, but the company said its offers didn't compromise safety. The Teamsters said CN wanted more power to order workers to relocate across Canada. Its offers didn't compromise safety. The Teamsters said CN wanted more power to order workers to relocate across Canada, but the company said that relocation would be voluntary. The federal government had rejected demands from both of the railways and from business groups to eliminate even the possibility of this labor dispute by forcing both sides into binding arbitration. But earlier today, the federal labor minister said absolutely not to that. Now, the Teamsters have said they remain at the bargaining table, but at the same time, all of their workers are locked out, Adrian.
Okay, so that's the story of the workers.
And the careers. Catch my reporting on TV, on our website, and on all our social media platforms.
Yana Lee, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Hello, you're tuned in to Daybreak on France 24. I'm Karis Garland. Thanks for joining us. Here's a look at our top stories this hour. Tim Walz has accepted the Democratic nomination for vice president in a plain-spoken but searing speech that incorporated football metaphors and Donald Trump critiques. The Israeli military continued to pound Gaza with airstrikes overnight after bombardment killed at least 24 people on Wednesday, according to the health ministry. And Ukraine's military says its forces have come under repeated attack around the town of Pokrovsk as Russian forces seize more territory across the eastern Donetsk region.
Mackenzie Clark, Detective Inspector, Metropolitan Police.
A new Australian take on Death in Paradise.
The only thing that makes sense is murder.
Return to Paradise, Sunday, September 8 on ABC.
Today, Tim Walz accepts the nomination to be Kamala Harris's running mate and makes his pitch to American voters.
Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced, and Kamala Harris is ready.
Monash IVF agrees to pay $56 million in compensation to hundreds of patients whose embryos were destroyed. ABC Managing Director David Anderson announces he'll step down after almost 6 years at the helm. And a pilot and passenger walk away with only minor injuries after crashing into a Western Sydney park. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Catherine Robinson.
Intuitive, inclusive, informative. TRTworld.com.
You're watching TRT World. I'm Paul Hawkins. A reminder of our top stories this hour. At least 16 people have been killed in Israeli strikes across Gaza on Thursday. Israeli forces targeted a house in Beit Lahir, killing at least 11 people. Israeli shelling also struck a house in Al-Maghazi camp. Thousands of Palestinians have fled parts of Deir el-Balah and Khan Yunis as the Israeli military issued new evacuation orders.
Israeli forces killed people. They fire at us. They fire shells at us. The people do not know where to go. Even Al-Mawasi is not safe. We do not know where to go, to see or where. That is more merciful.
Kamala Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, has officially accepted the vice presidential nomination. The speeches from former President Bill Clinton, singer John Legend, and a surprise speech from Oprah Winfrey before Walz, a former American football coach and teacher, took to the stage.
I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe our first responsibility is to keep our kids safe. That's what this is all about. The responsibility we have to our kids, to each other, and to the future that we're building together, in which everyone is free to build the kind of life they want.
The Republicans' candidate Donald Trump, meanwhile, has held his first rally since that assassination attempt on his life. He was speaking behind bulletproof glass in North Carolina on Wednesday evening and predictably had a go at his Democratic rival Kamala Harris. Russia claims Ukraine launched one of its largest ever drone strikes against its capital city overnight. The mayor of Moscow says at least 11 drones were shot down. There have been no reports of injuries or damage. And British and Greek authorities say a Greek oil tanker is on fire and adrift after multiple attacks in the Red Sea. The tanker was hit by gunfire from 2 small boats on Wednesday. It was later struck by 3 unidentified projectiles which sparked a fire and left it without engine power. There are no reports of injuries amongst the crew. The news continues here on TRT World.
Coming up, the U.S. presses Israel on the need to secure the hostages released and a Gaza ceasefire as the latest Israeli airstrikes kill at least 40 Palestinians. Top U.S. Democrats, led by former U.S. President Bill Clinton, urge Americans to stave off Donald Trump's return to the White House. The World Health Organization called on European governments to show solidarity with Africa in fighting the Mpox outbreak. Hundreds of emergency personnel are deployed to northeast China's Liaoning province for flood response and relief work. Welcome to The World Today on CGTN. I'm Li Qiuyuan, coming to you live in Beijing. Our top story, Israel.
China on Wednesday urged the European Union to stop politicizing trade issues after the EU released a draft decision to finalize tariffs on electric vehicles made in China. The EU's draft decision on final EV tariff made mostly minor modifications to the provisional rates announced last month. We urge the EU to immediately correct its wrong practices, stop politicizing, instrumentalizing and weaponizing economic and trade issues to explain the reason for the trips. On August 19, 2024, King Mohammed VI of Morocco granted pardon to more than 4,800 farmers who had been prosecuted or convicted for illegal cannabis cultivation. This decision, announced by the Ministry of Justice, aligns with the 2021 law that legalized the industrial and medical use of cannabis in specific regions of Morocco. The country, recognized by the UN as the world's largest cannabis producer, aims to integrate these farmers into the new legal framework and alternative crops. The agency has issued 200 licenses in less than 3 years.
It was Michelle Obama and former US President Barack Obama's turn to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris at the Democratic National Convention it held on his loyal base of supporters. It's expected to be a tight race.
Kylian Mbappe demands 55 million euros allegedly owed to him by his former club PSG. According to French media, the amount includes a bonus promised when he joined in 2017, Mbappe's last 3 months' wages and an additional ethical bonus. The 2018 World Cup champion reportedly referred the matter to the legal committee of the club's association in early August. In mid-August, he also referred the issue to the UEFA through the French Football Federation. After receiving a formal notice, the Qatari-owned PSG maintains that the sum claimed was not paid because the parties found a common ground. Mbappe allegedly consented to giving up on the money if he left on a free transfer. The dispute has opposed Mbappe to the management of the PSG for nearly a year. It is said that the problems started when Mbappe told PSG last year he would not activate a 2025 contract option. Mbappe's side now awaits a decision by the bodies they have referred to. The 25-year-old striker left the Paris Saint-Germain in May and subsequently joined Real Madrid.
This is DW News live from Berlin. A new high school coach turned state governor accepts a Democratic nomination to be vice presidential candidate.
That's how we'll turn the page on Donald Trump. That's how we'll build a country where workers come first. Healthcare and housing are human rights.
Tim Walz fires up day 3 of the Democratic National Convention as he becomes Kamala Harris's official running mate. Also on the programme, Israel launches more deadly strikes in Gaza as mediators in Cairo continue to seek a ceasefire. There are still disagreements over how Gaza would be managed if the fighting ends. Bangladeshis are throwing border crossings to get into India, many of them seeking safety from sectarian attacks. And rescuers find 5 bodies in the wreck of a luxury yacht off the coast of Sicily after the boat sank on Monday in a violent storm.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. On today's show, hope's dash after a 5th body has been recovered in a search of the super yacht that sank off the coast of Sicily.
Plus, the Home Office will release its immigration statistics this morning, shortly after promising a surge in return flights for migrants who don't hold rights to remain in the UK. It's
Thursday, the 22nd of August. Your headlines. The search for a final person continues, with divers scouring the wreck of the Bayesian off the coast of Sicily. Democratic Vice Presidential candidate Tim Walz accepts his party's nomination, with the former coach promising to leave it on the field in the fight for the White House.
Say it with me. We're not going back.
Taylor Swift shares that she has a new sense of fear and a tremendous amount of guilt after the foiled terror attack that forced her to cancel 3 concerts in Vienna.
Students across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are waiting today very nervously for the big moment, the opening of the GCSE results later this morning.
HMP Wandsworth is found to be unsafe for inmates and staff alike after more than 1,000 assaults in a year. Good morning to you. Our top story: divers have recovered the 5th body of those missing after the super yacht Bayesian sank.
Now it's 3 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 12:30 in New Delhi and 2 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Paul Singh. At this hour, Taiwan plans to spend a record amount of its defense spending next year as it looks to deter an increasingly assertive China. It announced a 7.7% increase, exceeding the island's projected economic growth. Australia unveils a $570 million deal to build missiles domestically. The country has been stepping up its defense capabilities amid a regional arms race. U.S. prosecutors charge a Chinese man in New York with espionage. He's said to have given information to his handlers about groups' Beijing views as being adverse.
Euronews. The news.
Ukrainian refugees face homelessness as Hungary amends its asylum rules. A key Egyptian mediator is skeptical about reaching a ceasefire deal as more details about the proposal emerge. Amid Russian advances, Zelensky emphasizes the importance for Ukraine's partners to continue to fulfill their obligations.
A fifth body has been found inside a sunken yacht off the coast of Sicily.
In what is seen as a tit-for-tat move, China initiates an anti-subsidy investigation into EU dairy products.
Sheep breeders in France are suffering a blow following a new blue tongue disease outbreak.
Hop picking season has kicked off in the Czech Republic, with many farmers joining in.
The brutal rape and murder of a female doctor has united Indians in anger. Justice! It is not just hospital workers taken to the streets, but lawyers too.
We want justice! We want justice!
And last night, the LGBTQ community.
So we, the civil citizens of our country, are feeling unprotected, insecure, and it's almost a death of democracy.
Here in Calcutta, the city where the rape took place inside a hospital, there is fire and fury, and not just the lack of safety for women, but at the botched investigation into the murder. An indignation felt by lawyers in the West Bengal capital who marched in solidarity with doctors on strike.
Our demands are protection, security, CCTV for students in every hospital. Students need facilities, especially for women during the night. The culprits must also be punished.
It was on the 11th of August that the trainee doctor, tired after a long shift, slept in a seminar room at this government-run hospital. She was then attacked, raped and murdered. And yet her parents were initially told their daughter had taken her life. Indian law prohibits naming the victim. A hospital volunteer has been arrested, and the Central Bureau of Investigation has taken over the case. As vigils have spread across the country, the victim's father has spoken, telling The Guardian, "We sent her to work and the hospital gave us her body."
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.